I'm very bullish on Bitcoin over the next decade. As much as we'd love to have Bitcoin at 500,000, I think that really signals that the world's in a bad place. Like it reaches 500K, reaches a million. I think it signals that we're basically towards the end of fiat. We're looking to sort of build on Ethereum. I found pretty slow to use and very clunky. Wanted to sort of something that's a little bit faster, stronger user experience, and I think Stellar offered that, and we built it. It ended up getting sold in about 8 months after being founded. I think we're now at the end game of what sort of crypto's being defined as. So I think the ability to speculate is dying. Pretty bullish on Solana. I think Solana's got some legs behind it. It's the blockchain for the future. It's got adoption. And then I think Zcash, I think there's a lot of chatter today about Zcash, but privacy is a core value prop for crypto, right? So, and you just don't get that with Bitcoin. You don't get that with Solana. You don't get it with any blockchain because it's all traceable. So I think Zcash is probably going to have its moment. I think we're definitely going to be due for a correction at some point over the next 3 or 4 months, but we're late stage for this mini cycle within a bigger cycle. So I think there are some push-ups left, but I think that's where we're responsible for the downtrend.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All In Crypto podcast. I am your host, Rupert, and today I am delighted to be joined by Satraj Bambra, who is the CEO of Rails. Satraj, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. And with all my guests, I like to start off with a little bit about themselves, perhaps how you ended up in the cryptocurrency space or what that journey looked like.
Yeah, so I think my journey into crypto is very much as a developer. I completely missed the Bitcoin sort of early moments of Bitcoin, and I entered in Ethereum. Ethereum was very profound as a developer. The whole idea of a decentralized computer very early on, I think 2015, 2016, around that time. And yeah, that was sort of my entry into crypto. It's all about building. And then, as you get into the space, you become a speculator. It's kind of inbuilt into the space itself. And
Absolutely.
I think it's gone from there. I built a startup in crypto, early decentralized exchange on Stellar that was acquired in 2018. And then, going into the fund in, I think, 2022. So it's been a long journey.
I always like to start with that because it always interests me just how all of us have kind of ended up in the crypto space. So, for example, my background's actually in dentistry. And you tend to find there's a lot of us here that perhaps maybe weren't tech orientated. I know, of course, you were as a developer, but there's a very eclectic group of us here that all kind of recognize a change taking place in the world and perhaps want a slice of that, as me and you are certainly here trying to carve out. You mentioned there, and something I want to touch on is you built a decentralized exchange on Stellar. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it was a spot exchange. When we were looking to sort of build on Ethereum, I found it pretty slow to use and very clunky, and wanted to
Yep.
sort of something that's a bit faster, stronger user experience. And I think Stellar at the time uh, offered that, and we built it. It was pretty good. Um, the company ended up getting sold in about 8 months after being founded, so it wasn't a long running company, but eventually, sort of after getting acquired, we took over Stellar X, worked with the Stellar Development Foundation, so sort of kept
Wow.
building the space. But in between that and before then, I actually started trading as well. So I
Oh
have
no.
I played online poker very early on in uni, and sort of got a sense of good bankroll management, and it sort of, I found a lot of transferable skills in sort of trading, and so is trading and building at the same time, I think, for a long time now. And they and I guess I'm still doing the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Trading for some people can be the sort of beginning of the end, but
Yeah.
it sounds like for you, it's not been. It's I find traditional. If I'm going to trade, I actually prefer trading traditional assets over crypto just due to its volatility, and I find that it's a harder field. So I have the utmost respect for people that certainly are successful at it. And I think that's going to bring us beautifully on to your role as a managing partner and CIO at a digital asset fund, Round 13 Capital.
Yeah.
The reason I want to bring this up is because this is going to give a great overview of perhaps how you view this space. And as a digital asset fund and a partner, a managing partner in that fund, I really want to ask you, why create a digital asset fund? You know, what are you seeing here that prompted you to actually create a fund around these digital assets?
So it was very interesting, like I think one of the things that uh, obviously treating myself, I caught the Solana trade before we started the fund. It was very very early. Like this is before like SBF's famous tweet. uh, uh, the I think he's at $3. I was much lower than that, and that was ended up being a really big trade at the time. And my co-founder was working with Round 13. My co-founder at Block EQ, and he recommended me to be the person that sort of runs the fund, because the fund had two pieces to it. When we raised the fund in 2022, this was before the crash. We actually raised at the top of the market, and
Wow. What a
when
time to
we
raise a fund,
yeah,
huh?
yeah, it's a good time to raise a fund because it's euphoric at
Yep.
the time, and it's Canada's largest crypto fund. So that's something we're kind of very proud of.
Wow.
And the fund sort of had two pieces. It has the private pieces where you sort of invest in companies, uh, pre sort of TG token companies and all of that stuff that you get to see with general funds. And the interesting part was there was a liquid portion, I'm a liquid trader. I like trading in the markets, and I think 20% of the fund was allocated towards the liquid markets only. So that was very exciting for me, and I joined the fund and uh, agreed to sort of run it. And we closed the fund, I think, in April or May of 2022. And at the time, it's interesting. I didn't allocate any capital to trading until after the crash. So I had this conversation where I said, I think Bitcoin sort of bottoms out. It was trading at around 47,000, and I think one of the LPs sort of came into the fund, and he came in at like Bitcoin was at $36,000, and I told him like he should just sell everything. It looks like it's all going very very much down, and I think I'd call one of our partners and say I think we bought him around 17 or 16K or something, just randomly, and we ended up being very close to that in the end. But uh, when I started allocating, so it takes a lot of discipline to just not allocate any money before you get the entire down, and to convince people to sort of get out of the market. So one of the LPs who invested, I think they invested around 10 million, and they got very nervous because Bitcoin sort of jumped from 35 to 47, and I was very convinced that we're 100% going down. So yeah, it ended up being a good thing because the entire fund since then has been riding on these liquid trades. So in terms of performance, that 20% that we started with has actually returned the entire fund as of now. So
Wow.
the whole yeah, so that's been I think maybe 4 or 5x on the liquid fund, and a 2x on the entire fund, which has been a pretty remarkable return since starting the fund at that time over the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, very impressive. Certainly, you talk about entering Bitcoin 16, 17K. I mean, that really was the bottom, right? After the whole FTX blow up, it's never that much of a bad time to enter a market after some sort of a catastrophe like that, right?
Well, I will tell you, we actually had money on FTX because we had limit
Okay.
orders there,
Yep.
and my bids were all the way down from 16 to 10K Bitcoin, and that's why the money sort of ended up sitting on FTX. We eventually got it back because you're able to sell it
Brilliant.
like 90 cents to a dollar, but that was sort of why I started Rails, because you had these moments happening at the same time, and it was good. But yeah, so in terms of the liquid fund, those were some pretty amazing trades. I think majority was just Bitcoin and Solana. So I was Bitcoin between 20s and the 30s, and Solana again same between 20s and 30s.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I could say I was as fortunate. Certainly, maybe Bitcoin, but Solana. You know, I'm still crying about that today. One thing I really want to get a kind of grasp on, certainly in regards to your involvement in the space, is like, what do you think big overview is going on here? I always like to ask people this. You know, you've got Bitcoin that was given to us, and then out of that or from that, you get the kind of spawning of this industry. why should people be paying attention to this industry? What is it offering? It's offering, something, a change in the way the world works, and there's an opportunity with that. If you look at technological revolutions going all the way back, there's always a brilliant opportunity to actually be an investor in that and take part in that. What would be your overview? If you were to convince someone or try to convince someone to start paying attention to the cryptocurrency space in regards to what it's fundamentally doing and perhaps the opportunity that it presents, what would you say to them?
Yes, that's a great question because it's kind of two-sided. So, the ability to convince people into crypto over the last 6 years was probably the most positive EV for them because there's just a lot to sort of work towards. I think we're now at the end game of what sort of crypto's being defined as. So I think the ability to speculate is dying. It's not like it was back in the day, which was much easier to speculate. So, like when sort of I think Arthur turned BitMEX off at 3K Bitcoin, the fact that it recovered from them told us it's going much higher. It was pretty easy sort of setup, I think in 2019. And then so you had all this fulfillment to happen, like TradFi is going to come in, we're going to have ETFs, you're going to have all of that stuff, and now we're there. Stable coins have obviously taken a big portion of this cycle narrative because it's just the easiest way to transport like US dollars all across the planet, and you're seeing startups sort of being built around that, and Bitcoin sort of it's established as this store of value. It's digital gold. It has obviously the reason for my big 3 to 500 because it has a lot more to climb to sort of catch up to gold. It to sort of build into its narrative. So I think that's just going to keep increasing. But crypto as a whole, I think the bar to be a good crypto token is just a lot harder now than it was over the last few cycles because one, this it's very easy to create them. Two, there's just too many of them and it's very fragmented. So you I think it all comes down to how well you're able to distribute value to token holders, and that just comes from how profitable you are as a protocol or a crypto company. So you're getting this convergence with TradFi at obviously like straight on speed, and at this point you're like you have to be sort of trying to get valued as a TradFi company, and it all comes down to your ability to generate revenues and all of that stuff, which wasn't really the case back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? My first introduction to Bitcoin was 2012 in the days of Silk Road. And I won't go too much into that for good reason. But the interesting thing was this space kind of spawned out of a movement away from the traditional financial system. It tried to combat it, right? It basically said, look, we're going to provide an alternative. It's interesting now that, if anything, it's being used perhaps to enhance it, or is on a clear trajectory to enhance the traditional financial system. Of course, disrupt it in doing so, then perhaps what it originally intended to do, which was to provide an alternative. In fact, it's kind of like the Empire Strikes Back, and you find this consolidation of cryptocurrencies towards solving problems that exist, and it's doing it in many ways within the traditional financial system. What do you think about that trend? Do you think if somebody's looking to get into the cryptocurrency space, and as someone that's active in a digital asset fund, what should they be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think it's how does crypto make uh, traditional finance easier and more interoperable, and I think that's sort of like where the sort of attention comes in. I think over there you got stable coins. I think that playing a big part. It's just the easiest way to sort of move money around. Bitcoin, uh, clear sort of winner store of value, and then new protocols that are sort of coming into play that are finding ways to grant token holders access to value within the protocol, not just governance or speculative value, but are they actually getting something for being participants in the ecosystem? So I think that part becomes a lot more important. So I think the tokenization around that, and also I think you're seeing like equities just outperform crypto over the last few while just on a trading capacity. So if you're going to enter a world where you're going to be trading tokenized equities, what's the point of trading tokenized tokens? You know what I mean? So I'm kind of thinking about that deeply. So I think we're kind of towards the end of the narrative component of the cycle, which started in 2014 or 2015, and we've had like a 10-year boom, and I think now we're coming towards the end of that. So the bar to for what a token's supposed to be is obviously going to be a lot more higher. There's AI in the mix, so there's a lot of interesting things, and I think a lot of tokens that I've seen over the last 10 years are very useless, and they tend to be great story trades. So we all gather around a story, we think it's going to change the world, and when it doesn't, we sort of get out and we short it. So I think that sort of we're in that period where our winners are going to be sort of decided very quickly, very selectively, and everything else is a loser.
So it's really time to lock in and to look at, you know, who those winners may be. Do you have any kind of takes? Obviously, we spoke about Bitcoin and comparing Bitcoin to gold, to a digital form of gold. It's interesting. You're going to start to see the rise of tokenized gold. And I think that opens up a really interesting paradigm in regards to gold's role in the world at a time when the world's kind of looking at the monetary order of things and sort of wondering how to move forwards. Um, in regards to winners, this kind of narrowing that's taking place in the cryptocurrency space, have you got any picks? It could be specific areas that you're kind of looking towards and interested in regards to who you think those winners might be in this kind of hollowing out that's taking place.
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on Solana. I think
Yeah.
Solana's got some legs behind it, just because I think what is the thing I always read on crypto Twitter, the internet capital markets. But I think it's the blockchain for the future, at least as of now. It's got adoption. We obviously have pumped out funds sort of built on top of it that has created a lot of engagement and usage. But there's other stuff coming. I think with Fire Dancer and stuff, it creates a lot more
Yes.
scalability and movement. So Solana, it's funny. It's the same as two assets that I've been bullish on in the past is what I'm bullish on right now. And then I think Zcash. I think there's a lot of chatter today about Zcash, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, privacy is a core value prop for crypto, right? So, and you just don't get that with Bitcoin. You don't get that with Solana. You don't get it with any blockchain because it's all traceable. So, I think Zcash is probably going to have its moment. I've been sort of
Wow.
silently bullish on it for a while, but I think now that I'm seeing the charts and how it's breaking out, it looks pretty strong. I think it's got some legs behind it.
I'm really happy to hear that. I do often wonder, I look at Monero. And it's very obvious that this space, as the likes of Ross Ulbricht and people like this found out, is very transparent, perhaps too transparent in some
Yes,
regards, certainly for what you
yes,
want to use it for. So it's interesting that you bring up the Zcash narrative, as in that kind of world that we're moving towards, where everything's open and you can
yeah,
see everything. There is going to be a need and a kind of a want or a necessity towards privacy. And Monero is something I was looking at recently, and I was kind of going, every single month I invest. I suggest everybody does that. What you can. There's basic books out there like Think and Grow Rich or The Richest Man in Babylon. Great books, and they encourage that for a reason. Um, but I was thinking, why don't I just start buying a little bit of Monero every month? Because I never know when I might need that or when I might need to. And Zcash very much the same story. And it's also interesting as a fund you put forward Solana because um, I watch every single week CoinShares' fund flows. It gives you a great insight. And actually, Solana is just killing it in terms of fund flows. It's clearly favorited by funds like yourself. And I think that's very telling. Watch what the bigger, sort of larger, smarter money's doing. So, two really, really interesting picks there. I don't know if you want to maybe expand on the Zcash thing because that's an interesting one.
yeah. So I think it's Zcash is what they call the OG coin, because
Yeah.
OGs like it a lot. And obviously being there for 10 years now, more than 10 years, it's
Yeah.
always been something with Monero. Obviously something we traded, but Zcash
Of course.
has always been there. You can never forget it, and I think it is going to have its moment. There's a big repricing that has to happen between even Zcash and Monero itself. So I think that look, in a world where you have CBDs coming in some way
Yep.
or form, especially in democratic socialist Western societies,
Yep.
and so I think that people are entitled to privacy, and you would see people begin to use Zcash, and it's available on crypto. It's on Kraken, it's on Coinbase, so I think it's easily accessible as well. So
Wow.
you put the two things together, I think there's a great trade setup there.
Yeah, no, I'm over the moon that you mentioned Zcash because it brings up a whole broader concept around privacy, around the world we're moving towards, around how do you combat that. Really interested in that, truly. And Zcash doing very well today. I think it's up like 20%. I mean, the cryptocurrency space, we're off to October, as they call it. I never want to say this stuff because I'm always worried I'm going to jinx it for everyone. But anyway, so you've mentioned some price predictions. So a lot of people talk about Bitcoin and where its price is heading. I think many of us agree that it's to the upside. Um, you said you think Bitcoin could hit between 300 and $500,000 this cycle.
Yeah, so this cycle for me is not this traditional 4-year cycle. So I think this is what I mean. I think the way we're running is we're having this very elongated, long tended cycle, and that has a few bull markets and a few bear markets sort of make up the cycle. So I think that for me, in terms of the cycle, I look at this as like from what sort of started as 2022 that sort of goes into 2030. That's sort of like what I define as a bit of an elongated cycle. So in current stats, like end of year, I'm thinking Bitcoin between 140, 140, 180, 200, something like that. Correction over the next couple of years, correction next year. Um, and then I think a lot of capital just flows into Bitcoin. It goes out of everything else. And I think that sort of tends to lead Bitcoin to I think, 3 to 500, 600 before 2030. That's sort of what I'm thinking.
And when you say flows out of everything else, we're talking about the stock market. I mean, obviously, there's
Well,
a,
I
a
think I think there's a lot of flows that are stuck in crypto junk that's just gonna have to come
yes,
out and sort of get into, and that tends to happen when you get big sort of like drawdowns in the space. So you
yep,
need drawdowns to create that urge for Bitcoin dominance to sort of rise up. So I think, but in the very short term, I think if you're gonna have like what they call an all season or some sort of like big moving, you need it to be Bitcoin led. If you look at today, Bitcoin is leading. It's looking strong. Bitcoin dominance
yep.
is up. So if you want to see everything sort of have a bit of a good run, you want to see Bitcoin sort of go to 140, 150 by itself, leave everything behind, and then sort of have a catch up on everything else. So I think that's sort of how it plays in the very short term.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I love that you tackled the sort of cycle question because we
Yeah.
always talk about crypto cycles. Most people look at the traditional Bitcoin 4-year cycle, which is coming to an end, right? In terms of if we're to follow prior cycles, certainly the last two, we should be topping out around now and about to enter a kind of 2022 again. And the interesting thing is, one thing that I've kind of used, and I'd love your take on this to maybe say, okay, I don't think that's going to happen this time, is given the fact that crypto very much acts as a beta for the traditional markets, the S&P 500, it very closely follows the TQQQ. Um, I'm of the opinion that Mike Wilson has in regards to the fact that the sort of Trump tariff pullback certainly was technically a bear market, and that we now have a bull market ahead of us. If you go all the way back to 1981 and you look at the S&P 500, every time it's corrected to the magnitude of 20% plus and recovered it, it's actually then gone on and rallied for a period of a year plus.
Yeah.
So I think the traditional markets are setting up in that manner. How can crypto kind of have its own bear market within that? What perhaps maybe I could get your take on that. What you think about what I'm saying there, if you agree
Crypto always gets
generally.
over levered, and I think
Yes.
what you're seeing with a lot of these like digital asset registries that are popping up prices, for example, on Ethereum, they are pushing it up. It's gone up from what a 21, 2200 all the way here because of the big inflows and big buys, and some of the targets I see are ridiculous, like 16, 17,000 in Ether. I don't know about that. But I think there's enough news to sort of pick it up, put it up to like 6, 7, 8K maybe, before it corrects. But I think that they're going to be a systemic risk in crypto because they're all going to trade under NAV, and they're going to eventually have to sell their holdings, and that's going to create a lot of sell pressure into the market. So I think when you have a lot of leverage in the market, that crypto tends to be the first one to sort of gather up as much as it can, and then it creates an element for a big washout. So So I think that's how you, even if you have a traditional market that's moving up slowly, you'll have crypto sort of going, and then Bitcoin not as much. So I think Bitcoin, what you're beginning to see is that it's holding 100 for a long time now. So it's moving, it's going. If it goes down to under 100, it's an instant buy for us. We don't see anything like that. So I think, and there's a lot of people looking at it like that. So I think Bitcoin's a lot more safer than other assets in this sort of setup. But I think a lot of the digital asset treasuries are 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 not gonna sort of. I think that they will be the reason for the a lot of downtrending sort of price movement.
Well, I absolutely love that take, because I've always wondered, how does this end? Surely the forever strat can't just be buy Bitcoin, maybe an argument for, but some of the other sort of digital assets out there, and just keep taking on debt and leveraging up and leveraging up. The question has to be, okay, well, what happens if the price goes down significantly? Then what's the kind of ramifications for the space more broadly? Companies have to stay on the right side of things. And if they don't, I love that that's the kind of scenario that you may see playing out. What's your general take then on sort of, I know you've mentioned the kind of Michael Saylor effect. What's your general take on these sort of treasury companies? Do you think they're destined to fail? Do you think
Oh,
that,
100,
you know,
100%. I would say
wow,
this is kind of like the 2017 era for TradFi, and they're using
okay,
that as the
with their
basis for.
ICOs. Yeah.
So they're using that, and now I think you have SPACs coming in to do the same thing. I think Jamaat always tends to be a top signal for these things. So I'll
Yeah.
watch you for that. he,
And,
he
and,
announced a SPAC
and
yesterday, right? So
yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So yeah. So I think, look, I think we're definitely going to be due for a correction at some point over the next 3 or 4 months, but we're late stage for this mini cycle within a bigger cycle. So I think there are some push-ups left, but I think the DATs will be responsible for the downtrend.
Wow. Wow. I could see catalysts as well. I've always said I think MicroStrategy is something to watch, but I've seen so many people try and short MicroStrategy thus far and just get obliterated
Yeah.
that it's like, stay clear. Don't bet against the trend. That should be kind of your mantra. And you mentioned there sort of a 6, 7, 8K Ethereum, perhaps not getting towards the double digits. What do you think drives that there? Do you think there's still a run for these kind of, maybe talk me through what you think the catalysts for that are?
Yeah, I think as the stock market keeps staying strong,
Yep.
you're just going to get uh, a lot more of these stats sort of coming in and bidding it up. And I think
Yep.
that's what you're seeing. Like the price action is pretty strong. Like every time someone calls for a big correction, it just doesn't happen. And today's a good example that there was a lot of uh, big sort of like calls for like it's going to go down to 90K. It's going to or to October is going to. So I think everyone's on the right mind. The Bears are kind of within zone, but they're too early, and I think
As
that's
always.
yeah, and I think it's bound to happen. But I think that there's a lot of momentum in the market, and uh, it is pushing up higher. I think with Bitcoin breaking 117 and sort of staying there for a couple of weeks, sets us up for new all-time highs. So it, it's an easy sort of area to sort of trade because you have this big resistance at 117, 120, and if it captures and stays, it's obviously new all-time high. If it doesn't, it sort of keeps chopping around and building a stronger base to sort of lift off from. So uh, yeah, it's looking pretty good in the next 2 to 3 months, but I think thereafter, at some point, it's going to correct. It always does. And I think if we were there in 2021, 3 arrows didn't look like they were going out. Neither did FTX, and it's the same way. I think it's just going to be the same. That part's going to be the same. Everyone's going to look very strong until they don't.
Yeah, I mean, look at Luna, for example.
Yep,
You
that
know,
that was great.
wasn't
That was an amazing short, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think we
Yeah,
both got that one.
yeah,
You would have got it, I imagine, with substantially more size, but unbelievable, right? And we always get into this mindset. Certainly, when things, it's just the natural cycles of markets, really, isn't it? The Wall Street cheat sheet seems a little bit gimmicky and whatever, but it's actually a very true apparatus in regards to how markets and the emotions around markets go. And markets do move in this kind of trend like fashion, and
100%.
there is always a correction.
Yep, gravity always hits. we're not immune to it. It's like death. It's guaranteed. It's
Yep.
just about when it happens, right? And I think the telltale signs of a top are just not there yet.
Yes.
And I think that's just one of the things that also has to be there. Like if the market corrects now and goes down to like 98 or 100K, then we still haven't topped. We're still just building a base. We're still
Yep.
consolidating, and it's just going to take another 3 or 4 months before it lift off again. So I think that's sort of what we're thinking. So we're looking for that crazy maniatic liftoff, and that's the one where everyone thinks, we went up to like 150, 200. Everyone's saying a million is coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the
And then two
point.
million, three
Yes,
million.
yes.
Yeah, we know how that goes.
And then you see the first dat that's going to collect fort coin. Like those are the
Yep.
type of things you're going to see, and that's when like, okay, we're starting to open up shorts everywhere. So we haven't seen that yet. It's just a very choppy sort of thing. It's building a base. It could take a lot longer than a lot of people anticipate. So that's the part that's kind of difficult to trade. So I don't think no top. It's not topped. I just don't know
Brilliant.
how long it takes to sort of move there. But it'll be very visible to spot because the signs are always there.
And I've got a couple of questions off the back end of that. I want to ask you about meme coins in just a second, and what you think happens there, because meme coins for me are they've always kind of frustrated me. I've never been good at trading them ever, and that's just I think we all need to know what we're good and not good at. Um, for example, Dogecoin pre Elon Musk getting involved, I was pretty strong on this is a garbage coin. It was literally created as a joke, and then it was the best performing crypto, which kind of humbled me to the markets as they tend to do. So I'll get your take on meme coins in just a second. The correction that we're looking at. First of all, how severe do you think it's going to be? And it's hard. It's very hard to really nail that down. And I suppose the next part of that question, in regards to how severe do you think it's going to be, is are you going to be stepping in like you did when Bitcoin was 17K and reaccumulating?
Yeah, so I think it should be pretty severe. I think it'll be around 50%. Uh, at maybe 30 to 50% on Bitcoin when it does happen. But I think on everything else, you get this 90% 95% drawdowns. Um, so yeah, I think that's sort of what I'll be preparing for. As always, Bitcoin always a buyer. We have long term goals. I think it's on a longer time horizon. It's trending up towards gold, and it will eventually get there. But everything else, I think what we'll be looking for next year is shorting the market.
Yes. Yep, and looking at that as the opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. People often don't take advantage as much as they should. I think crypto is a gold mine in regards to volatility, and you can essentially monetize that. And we've spoke to funds that are literally just centered around crypto's volatility. They don't care which way it goes; they just want the volatility, and they're like, "This is a gold mine." And I've always, I guess, admired them quite a lot because I've kind of gone, "Okay, well that's interesting." You're kind of selling the shovels, as it were, but the next thing I want to ask you about is meme coins. What's your take on meme coins? Because I don't really touch them. Doesn't mean that I won't trade them if there's a good setup. What's your take generally on meme coins? Do they go away?
So I've only had two good trades on meme coins.
Yeah.
One was Doge back in the day, and I sold way too early.
Okay.
But I did short the Elon Musk Saturday Night Live. That
Yes.
was that was like the most obvious top signal of all time. So
Yeah.
that was I think I shorted on the night off. Like I saw him on thing
Wow.
about Doge. I think it was like 72 or 73 cents, and I was like, at this point, my liquidation's $1, and I'm just
Yep.
going as hard as I can. So and it ended up working out pretty well.
Fantastic.
But if you look at it, and then the last one we did was Pingu. We did that just recently.
Oh wow.
They're basically attention-based trades, right? So when the timeline begins to get gathered around them, so I didn't do like way for any of the other ones. I completely missed those. But with Pingu, I sort of saw the same effect, everything coming around, the market's beginning to trend up. So meme coins tend to be first movers in this. And I think before then it was Fartcoin. But I think they also offer a lot of like great shorts when momentum stops. So I look to them as a gauge for when they start sort of stop trending up, that I feel that the market's about to correct, so I tend to short them a lot. So that's sort of the way I sort of play meme coins. But are they like this promising, game changing, like the Murad thing? I just don't believe that. No.
Yeah, and outside of Bitcoin, what do you believe in terms of Bitcoin, gold? A good question to ask you would be um, about treasuries, but this is we get this is what I mean. This is why we need the questions to keep us on course, because there's a big question mark, I think, around treasuries in the world more broadly. If you listen to what Christine Lagarde was saying at the People's Bank of China, she was talking about like Bretton Woods and things like this, and I always go, hang on, are we heading towards a new moment similar to that? But we can maybe tackle that in just a second. What do you believe in outside of Bitcoin
So
in terms of the
yeah,
crypto markets?
I think the way I think about crypto, sort of like I think crypto more a tech stack.
Okay.
Than a philosophy, right? So there are some core elements of crypto that are important. Freely movable private money. That's why I kind of like Zcash. But I think when you look at crypto on the whole, it's a tech stack. It's kind of how we've built Rails with that philosophy. So with that sort of thinking. So I think crypto, the philosophy gets around like everything should be decentralized and nothing should be centralized. Where I kind of more, I kind of think about it more in the center where it's a tech stack that you can add to your traditional tech stack and build something cool and something interesting. So that's how we sort of build Rails. We want to have central compute, the power of central compute. It's unmatchable. You cannot build a chain that sort of is as fast. You cannot sort of settle trades as quickly. But on-chain custody makes a lot of sense, and it's something you can add to a sort of centralized stack and create transparency and sort of ownership over your own funds. So I think that's sort of the way I'm thinking about the space is how are people merging the two together? Because I don't think you need to have one at the expense of the other. I think you just sort of join the two together, and then you add tokenization in. Like one of the good things that tokens have done over the past years onboard people into crypto because they're speculative by nature. They have a value prop where you can all sort of participate and sort of share an upside. So how do you formalize the upside around crypto, around ownership of tokens? So projects or companies or products that tend to do that, I think, will be a lot more successful in the future. And that generally means like you kind of like a passive investor in a company by owning a token. So it kind of sort of becomes a proxy of stock in the company in a more formal way. So I think that's where like the whole regulation around crypto sort of goes, is takes us there. It's like, well, if I own this token, I own a piece of the company's revenues. And that's becomes a more solid investment philosophy in crypto. So I think that's sort of all these technological benefits of crypto migrating into the traditional world is where I think the bigger portion of the money is going to be made in the future.
Yeah, and I think for public blockchains that actually help enable that, and I think there's going to be a coalition of private and public. We see Swift obviously announcing their blockchain-based ledger. A lot of unanswered questions on that still, and I can't wait to find out and get into more detail how they're doing that. But it's very interesting that crypto. Paul Atkins would say it's the kind of evolution of markets. And Larry Fink's letter to investors, he really spoke about the democratization of markets through tokenization. I've spoken to a lot of people that are right now tokenizing stocks. Tokenizing money market funds is the big one. We speak to the UK's leader in that and some of the leading financial institutions around that. But when you look at the unlock that tokenization can bring to the markets, not only can it make them 24/7, which seems obvious, but it's also going to democratize, allow the broader world to gain access to various markets, enriching that pool of liquidity, providing entirely new markets with perhaps developing nations and things like that. There's so many wonderful things going on. And I think it's a really good way to look at it that this technology is kind of enabling that, as the internet enables me to ring my cousin in Australia 24/7 whenever I want, and it's kind of opened the world up in that way. Tokenization does that for investing. Before we move on to Rails, because I'm dying to find out a little bit more about Rails, I mentioned treasuries. Now, you're a kind of fund, and it's important, I personally think, and I might be wrong on this, for people who are perhaps investing in the cryptocurrency space to pay attention to what's happening in the world around them. Do you have any thoughts on what we're seeing right now, perhaps with the gaining of gold in bank deposits? essentially over foreign bank deposits, over treasuries. We're seeing kind of a decline in treasuries and an uptick in gold. Are we looking at some sort of systemic change to the monetary world and how it currently works?
100%. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm very bullish on Bitcoin in over the next decade. And I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing. So I think as much as we'd love to have Bitcoin at 500,000, I think that really signals that the world's in a bad place. So I think that's so. I'm very happy with Bitcoin at a couple 100,000, and sort of delay that. The point it reaches like 200K, like it reaches 500K, reaches a million. I think it signals that we're basically towards the end of fiat. And I think, look, what's happening is we've realized that governments in all ways and forms are not here to sort of make
Yep.
themselves more efficient. They're just here to print more money and keep sort of keeping their voter base happy, and they're just going to keep printing more money, that they're going to keep devaluing sort of like fiat in a big way. It's also, I think, one of the things I'm seeing in the West is it's creating this real rise of socialism. So
Yes.
because what happens is asset holders are getting richer, but a lot of people don't have access to, like, Bitcoin's not easy to buy. Like like uh, it's expensive. When someone sees one Bitcoin's at 100,000, that sort of deters a regular person to buying Bitcoins. So that's why they buy meme coins. So
Yep.
you know what I mean. So I think that it's as sort of like TradFi sort of coming in, they're sort of buying up Bitcoin, they're propping it up. It's getting more harder for your average person to think about buying something that's worth $100,000 and more on that. So gold's still cheaper. It's what 3.5K,
Yep.
3.677. So I think you're seeing a lot of people buying Bitcoin. I mean, a lot of people buying gold, and I think Bitcoin obviously follows that. But there is this rise where there's a fundamental shift in the way the world's monetary systems are going to work. I'm 100% convinced of that, and I think what I'm scared about is I just don't know what that looks like in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
We
don't
talk
think it's
about
a very
yeah.
pleasant thing to think about, because when you sort of go away from using currencies and you're big holders of Bitcoin and almost no one else owns any, then what does that look like, right?
I think, I mean, such a great point that you bring up there, truly, because we own assets, right? So we are basically arbitraging the system.
Yeah,
But there's the other 90 plus percent, maybe 80% of people that directly lose as a result of that. This
yeah,
is why
they
we're
hold
such big
fiat.
advocates.
So they hold fiat. So that's
Yep.
the thing, and that's getting devalued. So what you're seeing is inflation going to uptick. I think we end up with stagflation because of all this money printing at
Wow.
some point, and assets sort of uh, risk assets will get crumbled in that sort of thing. So and you're seeing socialism coming in. Like, I would never think back in the day you'd have something like Zoran having this much popularity. Like
Yep.
New York's like the home of capitalism, right?
Yes.
Long-standing home of capitalism, and if that sort of gets a democratic socialist mayor, it signals a shift in the world, right? Doesn't it? Like and
Yep.
that I think that tends to make me kind of bearish on crypto in general.
Yeah. Yeah. And UK is a perfect example. I live in the UK. If you look at what's happening here, it's interesting. I watched a podcast about various aspects of China and its kind of states and provenances. And it kind of put forwards, interestingly, a more capitalist approach than what perhaps we have in the UK, in the sense that these states and provinces have to compete against one another economically, whereas you don't have that here. It's very strange what's going on, isn't it? And I think the problem is when things swing very far one way, and this could all be symptoms of the world that we're moving towards when we talk about these high asset prices. We're talking about something fundamentally going wrong with the monetary system. When you get that swing towards the left, what history's shown us is it then swings right back towards the right. And you get the rise of fascism and things like this. And I think everybody feels that unrest right now. And the interesting thing is, assets, being an investor might just seem like something greedy people, perhaps like myself and others do. No, this is a way of us basically saying, look, we kind of think the world's going in this direction. This is how I'm going to protect me and my family. And this is why people should be interested in all this stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that, look, and that's the one thing that crypto has enabled for a lot of people is it is that it's that overall opportunity sort of get in on the ground. And I think, one of the things that I think that so the other thing you asked about is like public and private blockchains. So private blockchains are very bearish for public blockchains because there's like, I just don't see a world where you have TradFi and crypto converging at the way it's converging at the rate it's converging, having different rule sets. So where they're like, banks and hedge funds, you guys have to be regulatory, you have to be compliant, but you crypto, no, no, no. You just do whatever you need to do. It's all good. I think eventually you're going to have that hammer of regulation come in, and if you're decentralized, you're going to have to prove you are. So I don't think there's a lot of room for many public blockchains to exist. I think there's going to be one or two that are important. I think Ethereum, Solana right now, and I think you're with all the private blockchains coming up, Swift having its own, and that's very bearish for the rest of the blockchains that just don't have much usage and it's all speculatory value. Yeah, so we're a perp exchange. We're sort of built from the ground up. It's taken us 2 years to build. So we merge central compute with on-chain custody. It's kind of like it's a very strong hybrid approach. We think perps are a great product. Obviously, very proven now that it's an important product. But one of our core theses is we're built with the regulation and licensing in mind from the very beginning. So we are licensed with SEMA. We are actively working with the CFTC uh, to get licensed in the states. And why that's important is to the sort of thing I talked about earlier is we built in the entire sort of setup of Rails with crypto as a tech stack, not a philosophy. We don't think it needs to be decentralized, and I think as a lot of our competitors actually become decentralized, they become slower and a lot more unusable. And I think that's sort of where we begin to shine in the future. And the other one is, like I said, we're now converging very deeply. TradFi and crypto is almost becoming one sort of entity. And if you don't follow the rules, I think you're going to have a hard time in the future. So this is part of why I think our approach is a lot more solid for the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to leave links to where people can find yourself, where they can find Rails, some of the various other things that you're doing in the description. Satraj, is there anywhere you want to sort of direct people after listening to this? Is there anything you want them to go and check out?
Yeah, you can sort of hit me up on X. I'm X Satbam. You can check out Rails, try it out. uh that's about it. I do post some stuff. I do go on spaces with my friend Trader Main. He's a known sort of trader in space for a long time, so we do talk about the markets once in a while. So yeah, follow us, and we sort of keep talking about this all the time.
Fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed picking your brains, getting some insight from you. Guys, you know what to do. There's links in the description. Please do go and check out some of the things mentioned there. Satraj, it's really been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I look forward to having you back on in the future. I love the fact that you brought up Zcash and some of the other things that I'm really interested in, and more broadly gave us your take on the markets and some of the various components. So a massive thank you for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
The pleasure's all mine. All right, then, guys, we'll see you in the next episode of the All in Crypto podcast. Thanks, everyone, for watching. See you in the next one.